You're live. Hello. Okay. You might be live. I didn't know I'd be making another video so soon, but it's a long weekend, so hopefully people will find it rather than, well, the last one nobody's watched yet. It wasn't even that long, and this one shouldn't be too long either. But it covers some points. Now, I'm not going to restate somebody else's entire video because I could just tell you to watch their video. And this is, as I kind of explored in my title header thing or description, their video was meant specifically for those working on a novel. Okay, and here's their crawl. Said, if you're working on a novel, steal these 5 storytelling tricks from film to create a more dynamic, engaging narrative. From mastering scene transitions to using visual language like a director, not a writer. There's a little bit, we'll get into that. These techniques, another T word, will help you craft a book that feels immersive and addicting. I think they misspelled addicting, I'm not sure. As your favorite movie or TV show. And then in the other part, it said tactics. So I guess they just used a thesaurus and came up with all the T words they could think of. But whatever. Thesaurus much. Okay, but so the basic bullet points, it's another one of those bullet point videos that I don't do. The first was, story structure, as opposed to having a free-flowing novel with seemingly no structure. Film, effective film especially, has specific beats, hence the thumbnail. And again, I'm not going to go into all that now. Either you've watched those kind of videos and read those kind of books or you haven't. But if you are a screenwriter and you want to make a novel of your screenplay, obviously you're more likely to be using your film story structure to begin with. So if you're a novelist, you may not have studied this. And if you're a screenwriter, it's like pretty much all you've studied. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Number 2, dialogue. Let me just read the bullet points first before I get into the rebuttals. Camera movement, visual language, and of course, diegetic and non-diegetic elements for the reader versus for the characters, which, again, some of this will be in the writing stage and a lot of this will be in the editing stage. So, yeah. So what I'm going to say first and foremost is these aren't really tricks, except for maybe visual language and non-diegetic music. Stuff like voiceover actually already existed in fiction prose before we had film, hence the title cards in the silent films and things. I don't know. So in the video, what she is calling camera movement is actually mostly film editing techniques. Camera movement is more stuff like when she said pan earlier, but then showed a direct cut instead. Kind of hard to, I guess, know those things when you're only in books. Sometimes I wonder if some of these things are actually AI and I'm just fooling myself into thinking that it's an actual person like myself. But I give it the benefit of the doubt. Then they said TV and film relies on dialogue. Actually, it's TV that relies on dialogue. Anybody who writes in film should know this already. Most movies are not dialogue driven, and the ones that are, I already did a video about this, how they can be hit or miss. The Breakfast Club versus that Dinner with Andre that the independent people always scream about. And then you actually watch it and it's just 2 Canadian loons babbling on about conspiracy theories. Okay, whatever. Does anyone hardly even watch scripted TV shows and sitcoms now? I guess there are still some that aren't all reality TV or game shows like The Voice and AGT. But from what I see on like Critical Drinker, almost all of these produced are bad and aren't good examples of how to write a script or a novel. So do with that what you will. Use a montage. And then in the example sheet says, basically, unless a montage won't work and you need a scene. So that was kind of awkward. Lion King is the bit that they showed, and that's only 3 shots, so it's not really much of a montage. I mean, Citizen Kane, I think, did the same shot with 1, or well, technically 2, right? I think in a novel, this could actually be 1 sentence. He grew up. Or it could be a better sentence for, you know, conveying information. He aged 10 years. I mean, yeah, it's less elegant or whatever, but usually something like this would occur at the beginning of the next chapter anyway, right? Or well, I guess I can't even read my own writing here. It's supposed to say at, I believe. Or more at the end of the last one. You know, it could be like a dramatic sentence, like something like, but then half a lifetime went by, you know, kind of a lukewarm cliffhanger, like, oh, really? You know, but then we're maybe like desiring some of that backstory that now we're not getting. I don't know. It depends. Depends on what you're trying to do. So then in the visual bit, continuing, they used Gatsby as a reference, which is kind of funny because the film versions of Gatsby have all been lambasted by critics, and Fitzy himself actually failed more or less as a screenwriter in his day. I think I discussed this in that previous video, two or three videos ago, about all about Thomas Wolfe and that film. So you can hopefully find that one. The 2 story structure graphs, the one that I used for the thumbnail, obviously is totally linear. I think the wheel makes less sense because some of those things in the wheel, here, let me have the photo here. Let me look at the wheel real quick. Hopefully it doesn't take me too long to find this now that I had to make my thumbnail. Okay, so it says, just starting here, okay, a character is in a zone of comfort or familiarity. See, that should be the beginning, not a wedge on its own, right? And you'll see why when I get to the previous wedge that becomes my last wedge. They desire something. Yes, desire. That's your first 10 pages. They enter an unfamiliar situation. Life happens. Yes. They adapt to that situation. Yes. Fail or, you know, sink or swim, fight or flight, do or die. They get that which they wanted. Not always. This doesn't always happen right here. Or not exactly what they wanted. Like in Star Wars, Han Solo gets what he wants, but Luke is depressed because Han Solo's leaving. He's taking the money and running. What? He can't be doing that. So they really didn't get what they wanted, right? Yet, not yet. Not both of them. Not all of them. Whatever. They pay a heavy price for it. No. Well, Luke is paying a price because Darth Vader is on his butt, but Han Solo is, you know, not paying any price. He's scot-free if he chooses. They return to their familiar situation. Well, then they haven't returned to their familiar situation at all, because Han Solo comes in and blows Darth Vader off the track, and Luke kills the Death Star, and that's a totally unfamiliar situation. In fact, that's a huge victory for the rebels. They have changed as a result of the journey. Yes, they have changed as a result of the journey. And that's why that's the end of the story, not the beginning of the story. Because if you started the wheel as they have changed as a result of the journey before they've even had the journey, we don't have a movie. So I don't hold with that wheel graph. that was used, wherever that comes from. I think the wheel makes less sense because some of those are awkward or awful starting points. Yes, that's what I just illustrated. Which means that the storytelling is typically still more linear, etc. Story, not the story. You know what I meant. Storytelling is more linear. Yes, I prefer the other graph, especially from a screenwriting point of view. I thought Dunkirk was kind of a circular storytelling thing where I had no idea which part came before what, and I mostly just wanted to use the restroom for the whole second hour anyway. That was one of the most painful movies for me to watch because it was just water for 2 hours, right? Feeling very bladderific. Okay, not to digress too far. Narrowing details. This is both for novels or screenwriting. Narrowing details is more basic, effective storytelling than so much screenwriting. Many movies are actually bad because they are jarring and don't convey enough information to the viewer in, the blurry shots and things or whatever. I mean, it's like B movies exist. Some of them are more comprehensible than others. Some of them used to use, a lot of B-roll footage, or, they take stock footage and then make a scene around it. And they've still done this with more A-list movies and places too, actually. Mostly I'm thinking about World War II films where they, like Midway, if you ever saw the one version of Midway from the 70s. But that entire battle is very linear, anyway, because it's like, oh, we're switching to the torpedoes. We're switching back to the bombs. That's the whole linchpin of the thing, is the Japanese botch their chance to do one thing that would have been, because they're trying to do something that's more effective, and in so doing, they lose the initiative of the thing that they could have done that wouldn't have necessarily won them the battle overwhelmingly, but still would have, hurt the Americans more than it being a one-sided rout kind of thing. Okay. Or have you ever watched a movie or a show where the other person is constantly asking you things like, who's that? Or why'd she do that? When, I have the exact same amount of information as they do. Like, we've both been watching the thing for the whole time. It's one thing when they go to the kitchen for a minute and you get the drink and then they come back and they're like, huh? Yeah, and then you're kind of like, okay. And in the days before you could TiVo and rewind, that was really annoying, wait till the commercial and I'll explain. Shut up. I'm trying to, I'm in it. Leave me alone, that kind of thing. Yes, I might have a clue better than you do, both of us watching it at the same time, because I can tell the future or something, and sorry, but moms and girlfriends, right? Let's just leave it at that. Okay. So what was I saying? Okay, so going back to dialogue, television is dialogue, film is visual, period. Not entirely, obviously, like I said. Camera movement, like I said, it would have been better if they had understood the difference between camera movement and actual visual language, because one is more, like I said, more the editing process. Now, those things can be written in first. Obviously, in a book, we don't have an editing process in the same sense, because the writing and the editing are kind of two sides of the coin rather than two separate parts of the process. One is before and one is after in both, but I hope you understand the distinction I'm trying to not make or whatever. When we get to, and here's the part I was going to make a video about anyway before this came along, so this is kind of clipped on. And so again, I'm not really discussing diegetic and non-diegetic too much because, like I said, a lot of those things really actually already existed in fiction in one form or another. It's just whether or not you're a capable enough writer to understand that and incorporate them in a good way. Like, again, a film with a ton of voiceover some people, some films need it, and other films you're like, shut up already, we get it, Again, because a lot of times they'll have a montage, and then instead of letting the montage stand, they want to explain not necessarily what you're seeing in the montage, but like everything that would have happened that you would be seeing if you were seeing something other than a montage, right? Like their mindset or whatever, like that whole entire. So it would almost be a better film if we had that scene, but they couldn't afford to film an entire, war sequence or travel sequence or what, whatever. One, I think I might have mentioned this in a previous video once a long time ago. I was trying to put together a cable access uh, story, not a sitcom, I guess a dramedy, with the guy. And we didn't have, you weren't allowed to like take the camera out of the studio. So I was trying to think of a way to be able to film it on set with only one location per week, but have different actors every time, and like one or two main characters and then different actors every time. And it would, so the idea was they were traveling from place to place. And even though we would be filming it on the same sound stage every week, all of a sudden now we're in Baltimore with Joe and Freddie or whatever, that kind of thing. And so obviously the travel parts would have had to have been stock footage intercut or something of cars driving down the highway. There was no way to take, like I said, the camera out. And so, but that's a very odd and limiting way to do things. Most independent film even doesn't suffer that much limitation. And of course, he wanted me to do all the work and didn't do anything. And so I wrote and tried to turn it into a novel instead, which remains unpublished. Anyway, because filming the thing, it would have been a dull movie. I'd have to rewrite it to make it into a movie rather than an episodic series. But anyway, the thing discussed in the thing is about how, you're kind of playing chess with your characters, and conceiving all the moves. Again, that's more of a novel thing, definitely, because, and Larry Niven did a science fiction book called All the Myriad Ways back in the 60s that addresses this. And there have been films like this already. Every conjunction or crossroads in the character's life makes its own literal reality. Like that character branches off and becomes two separate timelines that both exist. This doesn't work so great when you're working with an outline toward an actual goal in a movie or a book. Like, so if you took a screenwriting structure and made a book with it, like, again, which you maybe should, it might be fun writing the character's alternate universe and separate life, which would take you also maybe forever, but that should be its own separate story instead, with different, change the character's name and make it a different story when you come up with all these zany new ideas that don't have anything to do with your ending, your plot points, what you've already established that should be this story to begin with. Like I said, there have already been movies made like this. One with Gwyneth Paltrow called Sliding Doors. There was a whole season, I think, of Community where they started just making dark, not funny sitcom. And then an alternate version that's been done is the opposing POV redundant kind of thing, like Rashomon, where the audience must play the jury and discover their truth kind of based on the facts of the alternate narratives from two opposing characters. I'm sure there's been courtroom dramas that were patterned after Rashomon, but I can't think of any at the moment. But this is, of course, different than Jackie Brown, which I may have discussed in the comments of the previous 2 videos ago where I didn't get into the structure and the timeline thing of Jackie Brown. But Jackie Brown, there's only one reality. They're just playing with reality to mess with, the antagonists and get away with the money and all that. Not exactly the same thing. 20 minutes. Okay, well, a little bit longer than I thought, but definitely a video with a point that you cannot disparage or refute. And if you have any questions, of course, put them in the comments. I'll surely think of something else later to add. Surely. But if you can think of something that I forgot, or you want to argue with me as if I don't know what I'm talking about, good luck with that. But happy Sunday and President's Day and all that. I hopefully I'm not going to make 3 more videos this weekend or anything. That's not the plan.